enforcement uses techniques where they lie, they trick. It seems that every day law enforcement uses techniques where they lie, they trick, they get people to trust them, etc.
That's okay. Lying and tricking, getting people to trust you, that's all okay. And you're right to point out that these aren't norms that are, you know, written hard and fast and easily. Obviously, if you put electric shocks to somebody's genitals, that's torture. How much you can kind of play around psychologically is a much more difficult to judge.
Dr. Wheeler, welcome. Tell us what you want to do to this guy.
Whatever is necessary to extract the information that he has out of his brain. And I mean whatever is necessary.
Well, when you say whatever is necessary, you'd cause him any amount of pain, any amount of torture for a long period of time. Would that be acceptable to you?
It's acceptable, but it's not necessary because I think it can be extracted a lot quicker.
All right, you have some, I just want to put up on the screen here. Here's what you say, just to get to the heart of this here. Here's what you say in your piece today, your op-ed piece. You say, place him under the fMRI brain scanner, put him on a mechanical respirator, give him an injection of a paralytic drug, and then what do you make sure he's telling the truth, and when he's not, you just take him off the respirator for a period of time, right? Make him start suffocating.
You put him under a mechanical respirator, and what you do is you've paralyzed his lungs so he can't breathe. You've got him under this fMRI, which you can tell by the brain scan if he's lying or if he's telling the truth.
And guess what their model country is? Communist China. They get all the UN awards, all the U.S. companies go there. They're the model, where they have torture vans. And I saw this photograph of a young woman being choked by police with self-satisfied power trip looks on their face, taking her to these death vans with automatic injectors. And Channel 4, National British Television, airs Chinese artists eating babies, a popular act in Beijing, they said. And this is their model for you and your family. And then Bush gets up on the news and says, you know, Saddam's evil. He tortures children. He tortures people. Yeah, that is evil. And then they cut to the news program right after and they're saying, let's torture kids. I mean, it's crazy, the things that are happening. And back in 2001, there were stories, and in 2002, where they admitted the CIA was flying people out. In the Washington Post, to third-party countries where they could torture them and, quote, threaten their families, threaten their children. And millions of Americans read this and go, oh, I'll be safe if we torture children. Doesn't this show you that this government's illegitimate and, yes, did carry out the attacks as a pretext to do all this? You can't believe any confessions that come out of someone who's been tortured. And if you're thinking, yes, you can, well, then I guess Joseph Mengele was good in the death camps. I guess when our troops got shot down over northern Vietnam and tortured, I guess that was good. I guess we can believe those confessions. A government that'll torture is criminal. Don't you understand that? And to prove that torture is going on, you know, they're promoting it, and that's obvious, and admitting it, but there are good men and women in government who aren't compartmentalized and realize what's happening. Quietly, calmly, the AP and the New York Post reported in late 2002 that Brigadier General Rick Baucus, that's a multi-star general, resigned. And then the headlines came out, okay, he was relieved because he refused to torture people at Camp X-Ray. And it also came out that some of our military officers were quitting over in Afghanistan, refusing to torture people. You're thinking, hey, those are terrorists, torture them. The U.S. government got caught by Seymour Hersh at the New Yorker magazine, and then MSNBC and Fox even reported it, that 6,000, now it's up to 8,000, Taliban and Al-Qaeda cream was flown out to safety as Kandahar fell. They were all CIA. It was their job to play the part of the bad guys, to destabilize the country. Then the globalists come in and take over, who founded them back in the 80s. They're flown out to safety on C-130s to Pakistan to start the next war with India. They're provocateurs. Camp commander relieved of duties. The commander of Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, where suspected terrorists are being detained, was removed from his post. And then the news later came out that, yes, it was indeed torture. London Guardian, Afghan prisoners beaten to death at U.S. military interrogation base. Here's another one, BBC. Prisoners killed at U.S. base. London Independent, American admits suspects died at interrogations. They admit they beat them to death. That's what you want your sons learning how to do and coming back here and becoming police officers? And we got Alan Dershowitz on the left saying torture's good. Quote, we need to put needles under people's fingers. It says this on CNN. On the Abrams report, they come out and say, hey, why can't we threaten people's children? Talk about disgusting. Here's another one, London Telegraph. CIA holds young sons of captured al-Qaeda. There's a big discussion of torturing them. There was that article by Jack Wheeler interrogating Khalid Muhammad. It goes on to say, the old-fashioned way, right out of the movies, putting out cigarettes on testicles, breaking ribs, the whole brutal 9 yards. It says, by exposing and unraveling the plot, it says the ethics of torturing should not be an issue. Putting out cigarettes on testicles? I mean, am I living in the ninth circle of hell with demons around me? Our minds warped. You ask how the Nazis did what they did? It was for the homeland. Now it's happening. We got Pat Buchanan on the right, the case for torture. He goes on to say how wonderful it is. ABC News, torture for terrorists. Again, suspected terrorists. Now they say they're children. U.S. turns to torture to crack prisoners of war. Sydney Morning Herald. And then you read an article out of the Austin American-Statesman from back in October of 2002. Teen died after banned restraint used. Death of Mason County program, not the first for company that runs it. And it turns out they got all over the country. Do a search. They got this restraint where they choke you, twist your arms around, and kneel on your head. And it's known to close the breathing tubes. They use similar restraints on the young lady going to the Chinese death vans by choking her. And you die. Killing people. And kids have died in public schools who were, quote, restrained. And nothing happens. See, this is the torture, being institutionalized. And they also have moves, it's all the way up the Supreme Court now. Courts have been agreeing that they can grab citizens and forcibly drug them, that now the court can say you're mentally ill without a doctor even saying it. A Dr. Charles T. Sell of St. Louis, a dentist who exposed some of the Waco cover-ups, was grabbed, has been forcibly drugged for 5 years, and has been put in solitary confinement without even being charged. And the charge that they're discussing giving him, Medicaid fraud, only has 2-year sentence. But he's been held in solitary confinement for years, being forcibly drugged, and now it's all the way up to the Supreme Court.
I mean, our police in Austin, Texas, where I live, they've got lines of armored personnel carriers downtown now. They've all got these weird black uniforms and ski masks. They've got cameras and microphones hanging out of the trees. But there's crack dealers lining the streets. They won't bust them. But they'll pull you over and your family and demand to search your car in violation of the Fourth Amendment. This is turning into Nazi Germany. I don't care what anybody says. The evidence is everywhere.
Think about what these governments do. Think about the hell on earth that is being created. And then with the dehumanization, we have national British television, how wonderful eating babies are in China. We have kids, aborting babies in restrooms at the schools, nothing happening to them. Government urges under 16s to experiment with oral sex in England to keep the birth rate down. Teachers with criminal records remain in schools. Harvard professor argues for abolishing white race. They're on the news saying white people are evil, abolish the white race. What if you were saying abolish the black race? This is all offensive dehumanization. Students' pro-life t-shirt is equivalent to swastika, banning everything that's wholesome. Euro rules force church bodies to employ atheists. There's a discussion of banning the Old Testament in Europe, saying it's full of hate. Here's another headline. Has China become an ally? New York Times. Yeah, China's the big ally. They're the model country because they got death execution vans and secret executions and everything Patriot Act 2 calls for. There's a thing called bug chasers, Rolling Stone magazine. And it turns out that 25% of new HIV-infected gay men sought out the virus, said a San Francisco health official. They say they worship the virus. They want death. This is their own words. I mean, what's happened to our society? By the way, they already have eugenics of people in this country who are begging for food. I've interviewed Wesley Smith, Wall Street Journal writer. He lists the names in his book, Culture of Death, where hospitals, if you don't have any guardians, are pulling the tubes as you beg for food and water. No food order stands. Judge won't override guardian's decision. Who's the guardian? The state. It's just a totally overturning society. You've got to have your own moral compass, folks, not one given to you by the government. Doctor says he'll build U.S. suicide machines. I interviewed a big head of one of the federal government agencies on my show. He says that retarded children should be killed. Dr. Peter Singer calls them worthless mackerel. They said they should check fetuses in the womb and make you have abortions. And it's nuts. Studies show